I'm author and critic David Agronoff. I'm a horror and science fiction author, critic, and researcher. In this podcast, I wanted to provide in-depth interviews and panel discussions with everyone from New York Times bestselling authors to researchers, musicians, and anyone I find interesting. Welcome to Postcards from a Dying World. Hello and welcome to another special episode of Postcards from a Dying World. I have returning guest Izzy Lee, and we're going to get back into some of the stuff we talked about last time and then talk about her book. But I have to mention a few things before we get started, which is longtime listeners will notice there have not been a ton of episodes lately. Well, I am neck deep in preparations for we're hosting StokerCon in San Diego, and I'm in charge of panels and making sure the panels go off on time, and it's a lot of work. So I haven't been able to do a lot of episodes of the podcast lately. There's some other things going on, and I'm doing the final edits on Unfinished PKD, which is my first nonfiction book, and I'm footnoting the whole fucking thing, and it's taking a long time, which is really hard work. It's what I was doing most of the morning. So I'm almost done with that. So you're going to get more episodes soon. And I know the Science Fiction Hall of Fame episode on Nightfall, Isaac Asimov, is already a month late, but that is not my fault. I've been trying to get an astronomer on to talk about the science of that story, and astronomers are really bad at communicating about podcasts because they don't give a shit about them, because they don't need to promote anything or whatever. So I have been emailing two different astronomers trying to get them nailed down, and that is why that episode is late. So I apologize that your Science Fiction Hall of Fame episode is late. I will get to it. I will continue the series. We'll finish the whole book. But anyways, that's all out of the way. Izzy and I were already talking about some things, so we might have to repeat some things because we were having an interesting conversation as we've got StokerCon coming up. And we were talking about an experience that I had with Clive Barker. And I was talking about how I went to a signing. There was only 4 people there, and how Clive treated us like we were royalty. And I have a feeling you were going to tell me a story about an experience of yours that was similar, right, Izzy? Like,
Yeah, I had a retrospective in January of LA, 2023 last year in LA, and it was raining because January is often wet in LA more than any other time of year. You know, you can have a really wet winter down there. And I was having the same sort of thought where like, all right, what if no one shows up because people don't like to drive in LA in the rain because
right.
it's scary. Um, those of us who
California
were
people aren't used to this. Yeah.
right, exactly. Being from New England originally, it's nothing to us. So
Yeah.
I'd lived in LA before previously. I had known about the reticence to travel when anything is going on. The traffic sucks. The highways aren't really made for weather. So I was like, all right, it's pouring. I don't know if anyone's gonna come, but I did have a few very nice friends that came out, and we just made it a party, you know. We just made
Yeah.
it a party. We had a good time. It just I was just like, you have to kind of reframe things like that, you know. It's like, let's just go have a hangout with a couple of friends. It'll be fun, and who cares, you know?
Yeah, it's funny because I just did the book release party for my most recent book in my hometown, and I got 50 people to come out,
It's
and
amazing.
everyone was like, "How did you do that?" And I said, "Well, first thing you have to do is plan it around a solar eclipse," because that is what I did. And sometimes you just like you can't expect that kind of thing, and sometimes you have to like plan for specific things. Also, we had amazing weather, so we ended up being one of the best places in the country to see the solar eclipse, so a lot of people came. But most book events and most things like that are not super well attended, and one of the things that we were starting the conversation about was that as much as like young authors are like really excited to read, we were talking about how at StokerCon we have like 90 authors reading, right? And a reading blocks of four. And I don't know how much attention they can expect to get for that. And because like there's panels the whole time, and there's all kinds of things to do, and it's in San Diego, so there's fun things to do outside of the con.
Yeah.
And it's about setting expectations and being like, okay, if you know your reading doesn't have a ton of people, right? And like I think what you're saying is great, because you have to kind of reframe these things sometimes to like whatever success you have is great. And that's the lesson I learned from that Clive Barker experience, because he treated us like we were the four most important people in the world who showed up to this event in Orange County. And part of the story I told you was is that a year later at StokerCon in 2005, he actually remembered me because I was a part of this thing. So what I would like to put out to people is if a ton of people don't come to your reading or your events in the future, still treat them like the very cool people they are, that they came to support your thing, right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
um and I'm sure you've had experiences too with Film Fest, because Film Fest a lot of
Mm.
times there's tons of programming. So, you may have made a great movie, but you know, sometimes there's just so much going on that it's hard, to pack a room for everything. Although I was sitting in a pretty big crowd at HIF to watch one of your movies, so I've been lucky, right?
Yeah, sometimes you get lucky if it's like a smaller or a medium festival and it's a one theater.
Yeah,
Like those are great because everyone can see everything if you want, if you had the time, and you don't have to figure out against competing blocks of programming what am I gonna love maybe? What am I gonna miss out on? And that can be a hard decision. But I've been kicking around the festival circuit for quite a bit, and you know, I'm used to it. You can't take it personally. People walk
yeah.
in, walk out. You just have to keep going. If you're reading, or if you're on stage doing a Q&A, or if it's during a film, it's just whatever. You can't let it bother you. There's so many other things to be bothered about in the world.
Yeah, if you're gonna put your art out there, you got to have thick skin, you know.
Yes.
Yes. Speaking of, so the last time you were on, you were raising money for your first feature production, House of Ashes.
Yeah.
And since we've talked, you filmed it, and you're currently in post production. Do you want to give the folks a little bit of an update on what's going on with House of Ashes?
Yeah. So filming took place most of January. Um, our post team, and it's been a bit of a wild ride. Our original post team had too much to do and had to go on to other projects. So then there was a bit of a fun time interviewing replacements, and the new editor I got and the new VFX person I got are fucking amazing, and I'm having a great time finally. Things are coming together. Um, Two-thirds of the film is just about finished being edited, and there's some fine-tuning and tweaks. And I'm just so excited. Like things are finally coming together in a way that I'm gonna be proud of. And it's
Now,
gonna be
did
run
you
by
have
so people.
did you have a lead actor? I think you had a lead actor cast before you started fundraising, right? Or
You know, that that was a whole journey on its own because I was talking to different people and I was going to go with a lead cast before I fundraised for anything, figuring like, or if I get somebody aboard now that will help in terms of attracting some money, etc. And there was someone I was talking to, and she was in post production on a different film because she was a director as well as a actor. And it just took so long and it didn't work out. And then it cost me 6 months.
Hmm.
And I just said to myself, you know what, I cannot wait anymore. This is just ridiculous, you know? I have a feeling because I had spoken to a number of other filmmaker friends, and this has turned out to be true in my case. Things happen, and if you delay, you're gonna lose your momentum
Right.
creatively, maybe your morale, and it's gonna be hard. So what I did was I launched the Kickstarter in September, and it ended in early October. Um, or was it mid-October? I don't know. It's all a PTSD blur.
Right.
Um, and I ended up finding somebody right around the time after I had just like closed the campaign, like it was successful, it had ended. Um, we had raised double the amount that um, we had started off with, which is another thing which was so rad. But I found the actor, my lead actress, right after the campaign. So it's a long way of saying like there are a lot of storms that come,
Right.
but things in the film world happen to have this chaos energy and
Right.
come together at the last moment. Like I swear to God, it's like some film gods up there messing with you, messing with you, messing with you, seeing what you like, what is this person made of? Let's find out. And then like, okay, you're good. You know what you're doing. Now we're going to help you out. We've already put you through the ringer and this is going to happen for you, but not until we torment you a whole bunch first. And so yeah, I interviewed and had a number of actresses read, and I think it was actress number nine that was the winner. And it was only because a friend had seen her play at a short she had in Screamfest in LA, and had known the material because he was a backer and a close friend, and said, "Hey, I think you might want to talk to this person for your lead." And I
Mm.
said, "Great." And I looked up the short, and that was another filmmaker that I also know. And so I asked him for a screener. She was great, as I had heard. And I contacted her, got her contact information through that filmmaker, and we started talking. She read, she was spot on. Her instincts were great. And we started going into pre-production full force right after that. So I hired her, and then we shot a few months later.
That's great. And so filming, I'm sure, is its own adventure, right?
Yeah.
But how many days did you have to film? And did you stay on time? Because I know that's super
Yeah.
hard.
It is difficult because there are some sequences and some scenes, depending on what you're filming, that will take much longer than others. Like you can't go into it saying like, I'm gonna film 5 scenes today. It can't
Yeah.
work like that because of the nature of the scene. Like even long dialogue heavy scenes, like if you're doing a lot of blocking, moving around, there are going to be moving camera angles to think about, and you do your coverage. You're like, all right, I've got a wide shot, I've got a medium, I've got close up. You want to get as much of that as possible. And when you're thinking about doing a simple scene, you don't necessarily, if you haven't done this before, you don't think about how much work goes into just getting all of the choices you can to put together in the edit. And then, say for something where there's a little bit of action, there's also a lot of blocking there, and there's safety choices, there are angles, there are a lot of things to consider. Like for our finale scene, I blocked off an entire half a day, 6 hours, and it ended up being exactly what we needed. Um, you just have to have a buffer like that. So to answer your question, we planned originally on 13 days with a 14th and 15th as a buffer. We ended up doing a solid 15. And then,
That's incredibly fast for a
yeah,
feature. Yeah.
yeah, it was not easy. It was
Yeah.
not easy, let me tell you.
Right.
But we did some jiggling with the budget, and were able to grab 15. And we were able to also break up that last day. So we'd like some on this day and but some on that day because of availabilities, you start to get really complicated in terms of everyone's schedules, like who's available on crew, who's available for cast, and it becomes this ever evolving schedule circus.
Now, with the title House of Ashes, I'm wondering or assuming that the majority of the film takes place in one house. That probably helps things, right? Or,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. It did
yeah,
help things because we had one of the rooms in the house that we just used primarily for camera holding, which is you stow all your expensive gear there, you load in once. So I didn't have to have my camera team wasting time by bringing their gear in and out every day because that takes up a lot of time. Yeah, we had one big company move, and we went out to the desert one day, and that was a night shoot, and that worked out really well. But we had on such a tiny budget, you had to keep things as simple as possible for time and money demands.
well, and this is where your experience comes into play as somebody who's done a whole bunch of short films. Is that I'm sure when you were sitting down to write, you were thinking strategically that you wanted to do this. So you were thinking about the budget, the time, and everything when you were writing it,
Oh yeah.
which, you know, yeah, which I'm sure is, I think we talked about that last time. I think, um, that experience and being able to write for that, I mean, it's something that you can see with TV writers sometimes get a lot of work because if there are people who automatically know, oh, this is going to be a really difficult thing to do on a TV schedule, the people that write for it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you did you tighten the script even after tighten or expand the script as the Kickstarter rolled in because you
Yeah,
got more money
we
than you thought you would. Did you expand the script at all?
well, the location that we got to shoot the actual film in is a very strange location. Um, so it was, think of a normal house, normal being like first floor, second floor attic. Okay. But then the location that we got that just happened after a whole series of, that's a whole other story. It's a circus. Think of it like it's sort of like sliced into three layers and built into like the side of like this little hill. And then so I had to actually work the script to fit the location because it was so odd. Like there were
Yeah.
exterior stairs set into like this hill that I called them the LA Exorcist stairs because they were so steep and so scary looking. There was a back gate door. There's a couple of there's a side door, there's a front door. There's like two levels of patio. There's like this weird attic, and then some of the rooms, because it was expanded into this weird format, were smaller. And so we had to combine scenes. And it did take a lot of work. And we did even more of that on the day shooting, where it's like, all right, well, it doesn't make sense to have another scene. So we're going to cross out this scene. You have to combine them. And that means, like, for slating and editing, you're looking at, a number that doesn't exist and putting things together and combining things, and it gets kind of complicated. But
Oh, of course. Yeah.
coming from the world of shorts and into a feature doing this sort of thing, it's really interesting being not only a director and a writer but also a producer and wearing all these three hats and seeing how things change on the day. Because I know a lot of writers, we can get upset when our work is changed, or like, why did you do this, and blah 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 blah. But when things change, it's really interesting to be like, all right, I started with a solid script, right? And I did everything possible to make sure that anything to come was going to be mitigated. However, when you have real actors saying these things and moving things and themselves around in a space, sometimes in the moment, an actor or a writer on set, a producer, director, whoever it is, if it's all three like me, you'll see how something has to change because you just realize, all right, this motivation, it just doesn't work. And so what can we come up with? Or this that we thought of worked on paper, but it doesn't work in the physical space because of X, Y, or Z reason. And so it's really interesting to see how I had to make a lot of changes for, some challenges like that, you know? So for any authors out there, I feel you, but also there are just things that have to change because of the constraints of the space, the constraints of talent, or things like that, the constraints of gear and crew and physical logistics. It's really been eye-opening.
Yeah, the only thing I've ever directed was a fake trailer for my first book, Vegan Revolution with Zombies, and the amount of things that we had to change in the moment just because it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have any money. What are you talking about? Um, and so like things like, um, you know, oh, I don't have time to set up the camera to have somebody run out, so I'm gonna have the guy roll down the window and shoot a zombie out the door instead of getting out and hitting them or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
make those decisions because I gotta go, otherwise I'm not gonna get this filmed or whatever. And I'm
Mhm.
sure in a feature you're making hundreds of those decisions like all the time.
It's
Like,
wild.
yeah. Yeah, especially, yeah. I mean, if you have a certain luxury of budget, you can be like, well, I'm gonna make this happen exactly how I want it. But I'm sure even in giant films, they do that all the time.
Hmm.
Um, now, we went into your origin story in the last episode, talking about how you got into horror and all those things. And if people are really interested in that, and they should be, if they have not checked out that episode, they'll get to see a little bit of the difference between like Izzy funding the project and Izzy having filmed it too, which is a different.
I'm a
uh
little calmer now.
yeah, probably a lot calmer now. Yeah. How much longer do you think you have in the process before you're going to be out taking this to
Oh,
festivals and things? Or
man,
is that the route you're going to take?
it's hard to say because we are preparing a festival cut, and what that means is it'll be a cut of the film that works, but in terms of color grading, the color grading will be temporary. Um, the sound mix will be temporary. And if this festival yet to be named because of the festival world politics, if it's not ready for them, I can't announce it until they announce it,
Yeah.
but we're working on it now. It could be something where we play this summer or this fall, but while they're looking at it and deciding if they want in, I'll be working with a post-production house and they'll be working on final color. They'll be doing the sound mix. So the levels will hit just right and you'll be able to hear like these wonderful sound effects that my editor is working on as we speak. And then we'll put in the score and the credits and all of that. But it's really hard to say because not only do you have the question of will the film be ready? It's also, all right, is a sales team going to come aboard? And the difference that I will have between the shorts and the features will be if these sales peeps come aboard, then for the first time, they'll be making the decision on where I play festival wise. And that's interesting, but I also trust them because they know what they're doing in terms of genre festivals. So I might have, to answer your question a little bit more, I might have another month and a half or 2 months to go. And then, we're going to see what happens. But I certainly can't announce anything now because we're still in the edit phase and trying to figure that out.
Sure. Now, all that being said, we're about a half an hour into this, and the reason we're actually here to talk about, or the topic we're here to talk about today, is your short novel. I can see your lies. Now, it is being marketed as a novella, and this is a sticking point for me, a pet peeve, because back in the day, uh, Of Mice and Men was marketed as a novel and it was 96 pages.
Wow.
And what's a novel and what's a novella? Partially because 20 years ago, the big doorstop novels were like the big marketable thing. Anything under 200 pages, a lot of times people want to call them novelettes or novellas. I consider this to be a novel. I think it has all the things that make it a novel, and I had to force myself to use the word novella in your review. And in fact, a few times I refer to it as your debut novel. I consider it your debut novel. I just want to put that out there. And so there's a lot of things that go on with like writing a first time novel, just like a first feature film. You're doing these like kind of back to back, and
Yeah.
you have a lot of experience as a storyteller, right? um but it's different when you make a feature film and you're learning all those things, but it's also different writing a novel. And how did you, and I know we probably talked about this a little bit in the first time, but what was the situation where you said, I'm going to write a novel, or I want to write a novel, or were you asked? Like, how did this novel happen?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Real quick back in the day, before I ever became a filmmaker, I was writing fiction, and I never really submitted that fiction anywhere. It was just sort of a hobby and whatnot. And then fast forward, decades later, I was writing some short stories, and I got really encouraged by a wonderful group of friends out in Massachusetts. And they encouraged me to, submit and keep writing. And I'm like, well, maybe I will. And so, in the meantime, I'm also trying to get feature films off the ground while doing shorts and pitching all over the place. And I just thought to myself, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to write a book first and then see what happens because I'm sick of waiting on other people. I'm sick of waiting on like a budget. Um, with film, it's such a collaborative art, and you have to get money, you have to hire people. There's so much involved, and it's nigh impossible. And writing a book, very, very, very hard as well. But I can tell you, it's a little easier than trying to make a movie,
Yeah.
because you can only rely on yourself until you start submitting it or working with editors and publishers and things like that. So I had sort of the previous year, I had sort of had it with trying to get budgets and funding. And I'm like, well, I'm going to write this story that's inside of me in a manuscript form first, instead of trying to make the film first with a spec script, because I'm not getting anywhere. And so at least I'll have something nice that will make me feel proud that I can hold in my hand. And then also on the movie
Well,
end term,
I
they're like, oh,
IP
you have
is
IP now.
yeah, you have IP, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's speaking as somebody who's tried their hand at screenwriting a lot and written a lot of screenplays, 9 times out of 10, my screenplays, I end up, all right, well, I'm just going to write the book,
Right.
because then I've been through the bit through the rigmarole of trying to sell the scripts and shop them around and do contests and do all that stuff. And now I have a stack of 10 books, right?
That's pretty awesome
Right.
because getting nowhere constantly in this crazy business, I like to call it a carousel on fire, it gets really frustrating.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and then you have the situation where you can end up in the same situation where then you put the books out, and then there's people who pull you into the carousel because they like, oh, I want to buy the rights to your book. And then you go through the carousel that way,
Uh-huh.
which is also frustrating.
I'm
But
sure.
at least when you have the product, you have the book, you have the thing. And I'm personally very glad that you did this because I well, I know I'm going to appreciate House of Ashes, and I'm excited to see it. I also understand you're working with certain limitations, and one of the things about reading your book is that I know you were letting your imagination fly, and I'm getting the chance to see you not worry about budgets, not worry about those things. And I'm sure you probably had a lot of fun for the first time in a long time, just really being like, well, fuck it, we're going to Oregon, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, which not if you're trying to raise funds for a movie, you might just say, "Oh, I'm going to put it all in one place, or I'll try to do it so I can fake it from California or whatever." You didn't have to worry about that. You could just, you
Yeah.
know, go to the coast of Oregon, right?
Right.
So, um, so I'm sure that was a huge part of the motivation as well. And when you started to like figure out like what the story was just letting that fly, right? With the story.
Yeah. It was really nice not to have to worry about anybody or anything or any budgets or whoever's opinion, just writing it, first,
Mm-hmm.
second drafts, whatever. Um, and there was an element of, all right, I know this person has a house like this that I could film in perhaps one day to do this adaptation. So I kept that stuff in mind. There are ways that I can figure out of easily, well, let's not say easily at all, ever in the film industry. There are ways I can imagine this working out. There are ways I can imagine filming this on a small budget, which I would love to not have to do again, but I could figure it out. It wouldn't be impossible, it would be close to impossible, just like this one.
Right. Well, close to impossible is a great place to be with
Yeah.
yeah, so let's talk about the story. So this originated as an idea for a film, right? Like you saw
Dead.
this first. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long have you been kicking this idea around in your head?
I would say maybe a little less than 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good amount of time. So, um, and did you, when you were writing it, did you still kind of see it as a movie? Because I play all my books as a movie in my head, and then I see it as I'm novelizing that movie that I'm seeing in my brain.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm pretty good at visualizing. And so hence why I do what I do. But I could see like the way I would shoot this, and it would be like, all right, well, I'm gonna write it to what's happening in my head, and I can describe it all up and down, the coast. I can describe anything I want without the restraints of the screenwriting format too, which is
Right.
very, very brief. But in a novel or novella or whatever short story, you can expand on all these amazing inner thoughts in the world of your characters. It's really freeing.
Well, I actually think that screenwriting is great training for novelists of all kinds because well, I'm not a fan of the doorstop or the verbose, even though I have written one
Yeah.
doorstop length book that I'm still in the process of trying to sell. But that's a whole other thing. But generally, I prefer short and I prefer concise and no wasted words. And so one of the things I liked about your book was that I I I felt the screenwriting like lack of verbosity in it. However, you definitely added the depth and the stuff that you needed to, where you were. Um, I don't see the screenwriting thing as being an insult, you
Yeah.
know, to people. Like when I say like I can feel a screenwriter's touch, to a book, that to me is a compliment because I think most people overwrite. And this book was definitely not overwritten. That's one of the things I appreciated about it.
Thank you. Yeah, I have trouble writing long, actually, or I have had until this point. Um, I wrote a book in high school slash early college or late college where it was just all free form and composition notebooks were like a stack of them, and I never did anything with it. That was probably the longest thing I've ever written. Um, and then this would be the next longest thing I've ever written published wise. Like it's definitely the longest. But it's I don't like to waste words, you know. I used to be a copywriter, so there's that there. I used to, you know, do a ton of short films, so there's brevity there. There's yeah, that's been my training really.
Yeah, that's good. Did you write this on spec with no one in mind? Yeah. Okay. I thought maybe you did, and then it ended up with Sadie Mother Horror and her Dark Heart collection, right?
Yep.
And how did that come about? Did she find you talking about the book, or did you submit it
No,
around?
I pitched her because, you know, I'd known Sadie before that, and we were working together on a different project entirely in the film world that, you know, never happened. And we just, you know, we liked each other, we kept in touch. I heard she was, you know, doing this thing, and I'm like, hey, I'm writing something actually. Can I send it to you? And here's what it is. It's basically about a traumatized woman who has the ability to see when people lie to her, and there's the whole supernatural mystery. There's, you know, a cold case, a Hollywood cold case of her mom gone missing in 1979, and she was like, "Oh wow, that sounds in my wheelhouse. Yeah, send it to me when you're done." So I did, you know, carefully. I'd taken my time and
Mm,
proofread and went over it a whole bunch of times, sent it, and she really liked it. She told the publisher about it, and they read it, and then they were in, and I really couldn't believe I got it in my first try. That was kind
right.
of magical. And then, of course, come the rewrites, the developmental edits, and things like that. But you know, here we are.
Yeah. Um, it's amazing. Some people that uh you look at like Josh Mallerman, the first time he really tried, he'd written many, many different books, but the first time he really tried to sell one was Bird Box, and it's just like, well, there you go. It's his first real attempt. And so that's cool that you got out there on the first real attempt. And um there's a lot of strengths to the story. And I think one of the things is being on the edge of the industry in LA, but not in it. And I think one of the reasons why I think that's the strength of the book is that if you spend any time around LA, there's kind of this periphery edge to the industry too, sometimes where it's like people who have jobs that they're not like on the front lines of making movies, but maybe they work with a casting office, or they work um, you know, in the budgeting department at somewhere. And like, so the fact that Finn, the main character, that her sister is in casting, and that she had this famous mother but didn't want to be a part of it. This is a strength of the story, because I think there would be a tendency for some writers to go right at having her be a movie star, right?
Mhm.
And she's not. She's a normal person who's connected to that. Uh, I love that about this book. Can you tell me about the decision to go in that direction?
Yeah, I felt like, you know, we have an amazing wealth of media, films and TV, book that have actors and movie stars as these, you know, main characters, and it's great, and I really enjoy them. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo coming to mind as the last one I read that was really fantastic. And I love those, but I didn't want to center my story there. I wanted something much more introspective in terms of a main character and why she would choose to live on the edge of that industry rather than be in it because she's experienced either first or second hand the insanities of that industry. It takes someone who's probably at least half insane, and I speak for myself on this, to work in
Yeah.
that world. It is a lot. And it really does put people through the ringer for all sorts of reasons. And it's definitely not for everyone, you know? Making this film was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It's been incredibly stressful, and people don't realize how much it takes to put this together. But I was really more interested in what goes on at the periphery and not centering, an experience of a Hollywood experience at that story, but have it as background.
Well, and it sets up. I always say all the time, and my listeners are already like, if they're playing the postcards from a dying world drinking game, no, I'm about to say that to me, storytelling is all parallels and reversals, and so it sets up an interesting parallel for Finn that her mother was this famous person who was part of the industry, was part of these things, and they end up with kind of a similar marriage, but
Yeah.
but different because of their different situations. And we're not, I will give a spoiler warning before we get into some what I consider spoilery things about the book. But, um, the things that make this, I think, book different is that kind of periphery edge of the industry and a murder mystery there. And Um, but also Finn, who's your main character, the first act kind of focuses on her marriage and how it's falling apart. And then it's not really until like the second act and really into the third that you dive into some more details about what happened to her mother and then you have kind of this a good narrative trick by having Finn discovering her mother's diary and like kind of learning about her mother for the first time. So
Yeah.
um, good
Yeah.
stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really interested in exploring ways to put an end to generational trauma and cycles of trauma and how it's so easy to fall into a trap of uh, what has happened to your predecessors, your mom or your dad or whoever, and how easy it is to become that and not put a stop to it. I think it's really important to be self-aware and to have these explorations and to protect the next generation from all the crap you had to weather. And you don't get out of that without a lot of internal scars, you know what I mean? But it was important to me as someone who's also doing that to explore that in my writing.
Now, before we do a short spoiler section, in it, because I know you're in post production and I'm probably taking you away from a valuable Sunday of working. But here's the thing. Um, what I'm really appreciative of, and I know right now you probably can only think about this movie that you're working on, but did this experience make you want to write more books in the future? Is this something that you want to do more of, or are you like, okay, I got that out of my system, or do you want to do more?
I'd really love to do more.
Yeah,
It was such a breath of fresh air.
yeah.
You know, like it's hard for me to get myself motivated to sit down and write, even though I enjoy it in the moment. There's like this weird anxiety about it that it's hard to make it happen. And I think that happens with a lot of people because you've got this fear of like, all right, do I have anything worthwhile to say? Can I say it correctly? Is going to come out in a way that I'm not proud of or whatever. And it's not easy at all. It is really complicated, and I love authors. I love, and anyone who can craft a story that's well made and can make me feel something and transport me into the world I'm in to somewhere else, I think is a magical superpower, and I love it, and I want to do more of it. It's just like it's been difficult being in post because I'm thinking about, all right, well, what's the next one? I really want to write, and yet I have to focus on this movie because otherwise it's not going to get made. So it's been difficult to split my focus, and I haven't started on the next book. I don't even know what it would be. I have some ideas, but that's all they are right now. You know what I mean? So it's hard, but I'll figure it out. I just don't know what's to come just yet.
Well, I'm one of those writers who I have ideas five out that
That's amazing.
I wish I had time to write. And but everything, whether what this from doing a movie, like I think the Oliver Stone quote about writing, the most important equation in writing is ask plus chair equals writing.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just to sit down and do it. And but you'll have plenty of time. You can focus on the project that you're finishing now, and then the next, eventually, you can set aside a block of time to write the next one. And I think you've learned how freeing it can be to not worry about the budget and those things. And and maybe next time, uh something, set in the old west or space or whatever, that you don't have to worry about budget at all. I know this one you were still trying to think about how to adapt it, but
Right.
you could do that. And these, when the experience of getting in there and doing it one time, the next one you'll be stronger because just like making a film, like I did it this time, I learned these things,
Yeah.
I'm going to do more. And it's funny because, and I know I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth with this, because I liked how lean the book was in certain regards. And I also did complain that it could have been longer and you could
Yeah.
have done more with the story. But again, this was your first time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so some of the things that where overall, I mean, I love the book. It was great. I there were certain things where I wish I Mrs. Don't, like, I think some of that I wanted like more percolating, more building, right?
Sure.
And but one of the things that's interesting is that um that's part of the strength of other parts of the book, is the screenwriter's bare bones touch to it. So it's funny because I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth with this. But what I do want to see from Izzy Lee in the next book is I really want to encourage you to not think about the movie at all next time. I'm just, as your acquaintance, as somebody who's interviewed you twice, as
Yeah.
somebody who is a fan of your first book, I would like to see the next one be one that you never think about the movie while you're writing it. Like, and that might be impossible for you. I
It
know
might be. It
it
might be.
might be, but that's the one challenge I want to put out there is, you know, because I've been there. Anthony Trevino and I, when we wrote Nightmare City,
Mhm.
we originally wrote it, even though we had no contacts in the industry, we had no nothing. We just decided to write it as a TV series in the beginning. with the plan that eventually we'll adapt it into a novel, probably. But as our outline, we're going to write it as a teleplay, right? We wrote
Yeah.
4 episodes and did it that way, even though we knew we had nowhere to sell it. We had no one to pitch it to. We just, that was kind of our outline. And what's funny is that I know when I read the novel or when I was working on the novel, at first, the first swing we took at it, I was still thinking of it as a TV show, even though it was only a TV show in my mind, right? And I had to kind of divorce myself from that and start saying, this is a novel now. This is a novel. And sometimes that's a hard process for those of us who like see it in our minds this one
Mm.
other way. And but it is what it is. So before we get into spoilers, I just want to say one last little pitch. If you've listened this far, if you're one of my listeners and you haven't gotten the book, and the other thing too is if you can always, it's also very helpful for indie writers and writers at this level for you to request it at libraries. So if you can request this book, even if you're going to buy it, request this book at your local library, because that puts it in front of other people besides just us, right?
Yeah.
And I made the comparison that I saw this as kind of like a supernatural cousin to like the kind of feminist thrillers like your Gone Girls, your Behind Her Eyes, those kinds of things.
Hell yeah.
And uh but it does have more of a supernatural horror feel to it than a lot of those. Although everybody watch out, because Sarah Pinborough's Insomnia comes out on Paramount Plus next week. And if you've read that book, that one also goes a little bit more supernatural. And I do like this kind of building subgenre of feminist thrillers. Did you see I Can See Your Lies? Obviously, her superpower of being able to like see the light, that's a feminist superpower, right? I mean, that was the intention from the beginning, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a superpower for anybody,
Yeah.
but if you grow up female, and hopefully this will end at some point, I don't know that it ever will. There's so much bullshit, dude.
Yeah.
There's so much fucking insanity you have to deal with, and a lot of it is really, a lot of it's legitimately criminal.
Yeah.
Um, there's criminal shit in the works against you. There's patriarchal societal training. There's ingrown misogyny from that as well as a result. There's all sorts of maelstroms that you have to fucking deal with. And a lot of this starts in elementary school. It is fucking horrific. So basically, I'm writing about the horrors of being a female, at the core of this book. Just how to get this out of me and try to relax. And it
Mm-hmm.
put me in a really dark place. Doing this film, House of Ashes, and writing this book, I Can See Your Lies, back to back. I'm dealing with similar issues. And my God, I just want to do a comedy now. Um,
Well, I had Sarah on to talk about Dead to Her, which was one of the thrillers that she wrote a couple years back. People can search back and find that episode. But um, part of one of the things that Sarah was really excited about was I was one of the first reviewers to refer to it as a feminist book. And she had this reaction of where no one saw that she was making a feminist statement, because it wasn't like a Riot Girl book or it wasn't like a in your face thing. It was a very subtle thing about, and that particular book was about how marriages over time affect women, and how like the social strata of all of like this small town, because it was set in Savannah, Georgia, which was interesting because she's a British writer, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and she was just really excited that somebody was like, "Oh, this is a feminist book," because very few people had caught on to that. And when I think one of the things, your book too is one that could subtly go unnoticed for its feminist themes, because the horror themes are are kind of front and center, but they're there. And that's why I made the comparison to Sarah's work, which is no um, little comparison because Sarah's one of my favorite, most consistent writers. I think um, she's super well rated, but I still think she's underrated. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I know what
Yeah.
you're saying. Thank
And
you. That's amazing.
yeah, and so that's why I made that comparison. And I do um, see it in a kind of similar genre. So I just want to put that out there because I've consistently been, uh, you know, amazed that sometimes the feminist nature of these works by women get kind of overlooked
Mhm.
um, because they're not, the militant riot girl type thing. But so I love that about this book. So I'm sorry, I'm babbling now. Maybe we should get into spoilers a little bit. Before we do that, is there anything last thing you want to say before spoilers to about this book?
I mean, not really. You could read it in a day or a day and a half or 2 days or whatever. It's a quick read. It's a fast-paced read. There are elements of like Hollywood cold case, true crime. There's supernatural elements for sure. And there's even like a glimmer or two of like, some sci-fi crazy shit going on there. Um, but yeah, it really is about fighting back
Mm,
and trying to regain a sense of self, whether it's been erased by these I want to say a robe someone will put on your shroud, like the shroud of being a mom. You get fucking erased. The shroud of being a wife, the shroud of what society thinks you should be and what you ought to be doing. And basically, I'm saying, you know what? It's not worth it. Be yourself. And it
mhm.
doesn't matter what other people think, what society thinks, what your boss thinks, whoever, you know? Be you, fight back. It matters.
Yeah. Um, I appreciate that wholly. So the spoiler section might be short because I really had one thing I wanted to talk about in spoilers. But for those who are out there listening, if you have not read the book yet, this is your spoiler warning. But I have to talk about the reveal of Miss Don't. And so, and maybe I'm misreading this, but so obviously to me the connection is Miss Don't is the ghost of of Finn's mother, right? Like kind of um trying to communicate, trying to get through these things. And how early in the process of the story was that something that you were working on, or am I misreading this? Because that's the way I kind of took it. But
Yeah. Originally, in the first draft, I had the little girl Marnie, Finn's child's daughter. Um, she's also got powers that are rapidly developing and even earlier than when her mom had. So like Marnie being 9, Finn was 11. It's a prepubescent, adolescent, preteen type thing. And you can obviously draw parallels to like, girls growing into women, getting more shit heaped upon them, getting all the stuff that they didn't want or ask for, and nevertheless it's happening. Body horror. I had Marnie originally was just being observed, zoning out, and having some like, all right, like I'm working from the lens of a parent watching their child go into like this weird space that's kind of terrifying. And then in draft two, I was like, well, how can I make this more terrifying and visceral and an experience? Because I think there's a seed there, but I want to water it and see what it grows into. And then so that's when Mrs. Don't came along, where, all right, we're gonna hear about some shit. Maybe we'll see some shit if there's ever a movie version. I'm thinking definitely that's cinematic. Let's expand on that. But yeah, it got freaky. As it should. I'm writing horror, talking about ghosts and, echoes of trauma. So here we are.
So, and that sets up an interesting parallel in the narrative too, because Finn's reading the diary of, and maybe I'm remembering this wrong. It was a couple weeks ago that I read it, but the sister had the diary the whole time and gives it to her. Is that
Yes,
correct?
her mom's sister, her aunt, gives her the diary,
Okay,
and
the
she was
aunt. Yeah,
reticent to do though for years because, you know, she was not sure about Finn's obsession and had probably experienced, Finn's mom, her sister, having issues in similar ways and didn't want to feed any unhealthy, obsessions or anything like that, and wanted Finn to focus on the present, family, helping out her daughter, like navigate things and stuff like that. So, Aunt Mary wasn't like it wasn't an easy decision for her to like, all right, here's this diary. When you're already
right.
obsessed growing up, like what happened to your mom, like I think most people would be, but is it going to be helpful or destructive? Like, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah,
she finally relents and gives it to her. And then therein, on this journey up north, she reads it, one stop is at a motel, and then the rest of it at this seaside house in Oregon, which was, that area, coastal Pacific Northwest, is where her mom was last seen or reported to have gone before she disappeared. So, um, leaving California, going to Oregon, it's retreading her mom's steps, and some pretty freaky shit happens up there.
yeah. I kind of, and I didn't know if I kind of just added this in my mind, but I kind of saw it that aunt, and for some reason I remembered it as sister, but that aunt like kind of um understanding that her situation is parallel and like
Mhm.
wanting her to like, hey, maybe you need this information now,
Yeah.
right? But I also thought, there's chances there for her to like kind of glean like the ability that Finn and the daughter have for seeing these things is kind of putting the end on the trail of like now's the time where you have to understand, or maybe possible, you know what I'm saying? So I saw it that way. And I thought it was a very powerful part of the story, and the journal connecting her her to her mother, and some of the like her reactions to kind of speaking to her mom through in her reactions to it,
Mm.
were some really great and powerful moments of the book that
Thank you.
are definitely spoilers, so I'm glad we're talking
Yeah.
about it now.
Those were really fun to write.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then you get to say some things about the industry through
Yeah.
this part of the story, but also through about the abuse and these things. And so there's all kinds of interesting and powerful parts of that. And so and I do like that. What appears in the beginning to be like this kind of like creature or this thing, is given um somewhat of an explanation, right? And and there's a certain degree that it reminded me in certain parts of, and this book isn't out yet, so I don't know how much I can say about it, but with Mallerman's incidents around the house,
Ooh,
and other mommy in that book.
I can't
uh
wait. I know
yeah,
Josh. Josh read the book. Josh gave me a great quote.
yes. Well, you guys are back-to-back guests on the show, so
Hmm.
but um not exactly the same, but kind of similar territories.
Awesome.
And and I, say that as a great compliment, because I think it's one of Josh's freakiest books.
Oh my
So
God. I gotta read it. I can't wait.
yeah,
Thank you.
um,
That's
I,
amazing.
it was so hard to talk about that book on the podcast without spoiling it. and so we had a really brutal time like
Oh
dancing around
man.
that book. Um, but yeah, so I don't think I have anything else on spoilers, uh, but now consciously being aware of spoilers and that you
Mhm.
can say whatever you want, is there anything that you're really proud of that you didn't see coming in the book? Because that always happens in a book where you start writing and then even as an outliner, somebody who outlines everything, there's always like a bit of discovery
There has
when
to
you get
be,
in there.
yeah.
Yeah. And like for Last Night to Kill Nazis, for me, like when I wrote that, for example, I I created this character of Hitler's secretary that became like a really important part of the book, and I had her throughout the outline. But there's a scene in the book that's my favorite scene in the book where she's helping Hitler to she's remembering helping Hitler write a speech, and she corrects him when he says the Jewish people, and she says, "No, my Führer, say race," um, and in order to dehumanize them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't planned, it wasn't anything that I had, it just like came up in the moment and nobody else notices it, but it's my favorite part of the book.
Mm.
It's the part that chills me the most. And I'm wondering and I tell this example because did you have any moments in this book like that where like you weren't prepared for it, just kind of came out and it freaked you out more than you were expecting? Because writing a horror novel, that can happen.
I had a really good time writing some of these possession scenes and like, all right, what would that look like or feel like being trapped inside of yourself while you're being possessed?
Mm-hmm.
That is scary as hell to me. And I mean, I hope I did some sort of justice to it, but the feelings and sensations I wanted to concentrate on, like the terror of having someone else puppet you and speak in a voice that's not your voice, but it's coming out of your throat and your chest. Like that's fucking insane. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, the feeling of waking up and being dragged and seeing the trees, the tops of the trees drift by you as you're coming to, things like that. And I also like a really good revenge scene. So that last scene where, someone gets their surprise that leads to their death is particularly tasty to me.
Right. Well, it's a fantastic debut, and I know we'll probably have a little bit of a wait because you have a film to finish before the next one. But I'm just really excited that we have this one now,
Oh,
and
thanks, man.
I appreciate you sharing the book with me. I had a great time reading it. I really hope people, if they're listening to this part, they've checked it out or they're doing it wrong. So I'm glad that people are exploring the book. So on that note, um, I'll probably, once I've seen House of Ashes, I'm probably going to have you back to
But
talk about that because you came on before it was made, and we want to see the whole journey. And I'm really looking forward to your experience with that. And you got film festivals probably coming up, and I'm sure when you're able to know, you'll let us know, and I can pass that word on to my listeners. But Izzy, I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you wanted to say on this here podcast before we go?
yeah, thank you. Um, I really appreciate this. This has been so fun. Once again, thank you. And then I will be at StokerCon if this premieres before, if this
It
goes live.
will, just
Okay.
by the hair of his chinny chin chin, but because we've only got like 11 days
I
before.
know. It's insane. My God. Oh, so much to do. Um, I'll be at StokerCon, just, being a judge at Final Frame, running around, I may or may not have a couple copies of the book with me. Might be doing a giveaway. I don't know.
You'll be a part of the mass author signing, won't you?
I don't even know how that works, to be honest.
I know a guy.
Okay.
So yeah, let's talk about that offline. But
Yes, let's do that. And I'll also be at the Chattanooga Film Festival the weekend of June 22nd in Chattanooga, Tennessee, doing reading, signing books, playing an encore of Meat Friend, which is very popular, and then showing a House of Ashes sneak peek.
nice.
So yeah, come see me in Chattanooga, StokerCon, San Diego. So yeah,
Yeah, definitely we'll hang out at StokerCon. I'm excited for to have it done
I'll bet.
as part of the host committee. Um, but very excited. It's funny because I don't know who the furthest person is coming, but I actually can walk to StokerCon every day.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. I know
Uh,
there's people coming from Australia and the UK. That's amazing. So, not sure which is
yeah. I can see the hotel from outside my classroom window at work.
wow.
So
Fun.
I'm actually Thursday morning. I'm going to work till noon and then going to StokerCon.
Right on.
Um, Now that being said, I should note that I have the hill up from StokerCon on the way to where I live is an insanely steep hill up to the top of a mesa. So I'm not sure I'm going to want to walk it every day. Um,
I need a shower at the hotel every day.
it's downhill there, so that's good.
Okay.
But at the end of like 12 hours of doing panels and everything, I'm sure it's going to annoy the shit. But I walk up that hill after work every day at 3:30 every day after 4 hours or 8 hours of work. So I'm used to this. It's
Man.
it's a crazy hill and I do it all the time. So I guess that is what it is. But
Right.
StokerCon is coming up and we'll see folks there. So um, I am going to go out on a limb and predict that you will be able to get a copy of this book and get it signed at the mass author signing um, on Friday at StokerCon. Because yeah, I think Izzy will be there. So look for her there. And on that note, everyone, thank you for listening. And I'm not sure what the next episode of Postcards is. I almost always know it should be the Science Fiction Hall of Fame episode on Nightfall by Isaac Asimov, but I cannot get the astronomers to understand. Well, one of the problems is one of the astronomers I want for it lives in France, and
Um,
so the timing is a little rough. But yeah, it is what it is. So hopefully it'll be the Science Fiction Hall of Fame episode on Isaac Asimov's Nightfall, but it may be John Jackson Miller talking about his Star Wars novel, The Living Force. That might be next too. So it'll be one of those two. So hopefully we'll see you soon. There might be some content from StokerCon, but we'll see everybody there. Thanks for listening.